Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode. Appreciate all you guys getting in here. We got 13 people in the live chat already. Thank you for joining me. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button for us. Helps us out on the live video. Trying to grow the channel. As also throughout the show, you can utilize the super chat feature to support the channel in that way. But yeah, man, thanks for coming to hang out with us. We got quite a few things to talk about tonight. Talk a little bit about the Gator Bowl, kind of put a bow on that before we transition to officially what will be the off season. Talk about some news in the Clemson running back room, and then some of the recruits that recently played in some of the All-Star games. So appreciate all you guys being here. Go ahead and hit that like button for us. But without further ado, I bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Good, man. It's good. The first show of the new year, 2024.
That's it.
Just hard to believe how fast time has flown, and we're already here at the end of the season. And we got a lot to talk about, man. There was obviously news last night was pretty big, but just throughout the week, we had recruits playing in all-star games, and there's a lot of questions about how Clemson is managing the roster moving forward and things like that. So I'm excited to get down dirty, and so to speak. So, but yeah, just glad to be back.
Yeah, man, me too. Look, it is crazy. 2023 is no more. This is now 2024. Still feels weird for me to say that. I keep messing it up a few times as I'm at work writing dates and things like that. I'm sure that'll continue for about another month or so until I get in the groove of writing 24 instead of 23. But yeah, man, that's how it goes. It's crazy. We have completed our second full season of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel, which is crazy to think about. Can't believe we've been doing it that long already. And we've grown quite a little audience here and some regulars, so it's pretty cool to see that. Crazy to think that the season is already over. I remember back when we were talking about the Duke game, leading up into that game, how quickly these things go, and it feels like we blinked, and here we are at the end of the season. The bowl game's over, and we're sitting here at the beginning of January, just hoping and waiting for spring to start.
Yeah. And this is the first show in a long string of shows where we're just anxiously waiting. I mean, that's the life of college football fans, the longest off season in sports. And but we've maintained, and we've talked about it. Doing this has definitely helped the time go by, especially in the off season. It's also consequently made the season go by faster in some ways, but it's times like these where it's like, well, you have this show to look forward to every week, and and chopping it up with you guys is always awesome, and just talking about Clemson. So really grateful for it. Seriously. You're muted.
Yeah, absolutely. So, negatives and positives when it comes to doing this show, but mostly positives. It does make the season go by much quicker, but, as we've talked about and you alluded to, certainly makes the offseason much more bearable because we spend much more time as college football fans waiting on games than we do actually watching games. So thankful for everybody who's in here right now. We got 17 people in the live chat right now. A couple people already hitting the comments section. Alexander gets in here first tonight. John gets in here regular for us. And Benny gets in here as well. Thank you all for being here. Benny says, hello, everyone. I'm ready to move bowl games to the beginning of the season. this would be a good warm up game before the season starts. Thoughts?
Yeah, Benny. I mean, I've heard this, kind of idea thrown out there before. It's really interesting. I'm interested to see kind of how, like, some of the logistics of that. Um, but it would incentivize, some, teams to care about the bowl game, because you can treat it like your first live game, where you get to see where you are and what how your team stacks up, without, even if you lose the game, it's not a knock on your record or anything like that. But there, it would be a very drastic and kind of like tradition breaking sort of shift. And obviously there's some other things that go along with that. But I've definitely heard that idea thrown out there. I think it's an interesting one. Um, and I'm not totally, I wouldn't be totally against it, but I think there's some things that even I'm probably not even thinking of that, can kind of, there's some reasons why you wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
So, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like kind of all the talk and ideas that people are pitching about kind of how to fix bowl season. As college football fans, prior to the college football playoff and all that, bowl season was the pinnacle for majority of college football, right? You look forward to what bowl game your team would go to. That was in the BCS era, when it was kind of a different system and picking and all that kind of stuff as far as how the seating went. And it wasn't perfect, and the college football playoffs obviously haven't been perfect either. I don't believe there's any perfect system out there that we're going to move to that's going to make everybody happy. There's going to be angry people on either side every year, but I do think some of the talk around trying to fix bowl season is good and productive, because bowl season truly is broken at this point in time. I mean, you can look all across the country in different bowl matchups where you just see teams that look nothing like what they did during the season. And it's because a lot of players have transferred or declared for the NFL draft, or are not playing for whatever reason. So somehow incentivizing that, I don't know what that looks like. There's a lot that goes into those decisions, I'm sure, and there's a lot of unforeseen consequences to any solution that you make. But maybe the bowl games breaking off some money for some of these players. I don't know. I don't really know what the answer is, but I'm sure there's got to be something out there that can somehow incentivize teams to want to play in these games a little bit more.
Yeah. And with the just the moving them to the end of the beginning of the season idea, there's a lot, the TV executives and these bowl committees, like I don't think they would be very down for that, because these are very as much as people say, like, oh man, these bowl games don't matter. I mean, they do make a lot of money. Like these TV networks and stuff, they spend a lot of money to produce it, but they also still make money. Even people not just because people aren't attending the games doesn't mean they're not being watched. And you can go look at the ratings numbers for some of these bowl games, and you're like, wow, I have no idea. Like, people talked about the Orange Bowl and what a disaster that was, and what a beatdown that was, but a lot of people watched it. And so it's ESPN still made a lot of money from that game, contrary to what people want to say about it. And so like that's kind of the thing. It would be a power struggle with some of these TV networks to convince them that would be a good idea. But if it makes teams care about the game, and all their best players are playing, and even if you play them on a pitch count, or so to speak, or a snap count, so to speak, I mean, it'd be better than having guys completely opt out and having a situation like you did in the Orange Bowl. And then obviously the beginning of the season is a time where everybody thinks that they're going 12-0 and thinks they can win every game, and so gives them a reason to you give them a mulligan essentially too. So it gives them the opportunity to play a game, find out how they measure up, and without the consequences, and you still have the full season ahead of you. So that, I don't know. There's some positives to it, but there's some obvious drawbacks and some obvious reasons why that's probably not a realistic solution. But I mean, you mentioned like revenue sharing. I think that's eventually where we're headed. As far as how much money these TV networks are making, and incentivizing. I think you have to, like a base, like a base payout, per player, and I think it should be only if you play. I don't know if I think that would be hard because you still don't have like collective bargaining and stuff like that, so that could be an issue. But
Yeah.
I still care as much as people say bowl games don't matter. I still care about bowl games, and I was very happy to win that bowl game last Friday.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think there definitely needs to be something done. I don't think things should just stay the way they are as far as these bowl games are concerned. Either especially the non-playoff ones, even the non-New Year's Six ones. Like I think there's a lot to be said, and I thought Clemson's bowl game against Kentucky was an example of two programs that they had players not Clemson especially had players not playing, but both teams clearly showed up and wanted to win. And really, that's something you haven't seen across bowl season this year.
Yeah, it's super inconsistent from team to team and matchup to matchup, and that's part of what makes some of bowl season hard to watch, even for some of your most diehard college football fans like ourselves. Like, some of these games are they're tough to watch because nobody's playing in them, man. Like, the teams don't even remotely look the same. You got a bunch of players that just have no college football experience out there playing, and it's unfortunate. I still care about bowl season like yourself. That win to me, that Clemson got over Kentucky was huge. I thought it was something that Clemson really needed to kind of cap off the kind of rebound that we had in the second half of the season. So I don't buy into the pointless bowl games. I think they're good for wherever your program is and helps you to improve. So I don't know. I think there's solutions out there, but it's going to be a while before I think we get there. And like you mentioned, the revenue sharing and stuff like that. I think that's where college football as a whole is heading pretty quickly. Into some sort of revenue sharing model.
Yeah, absolutely. But kind of enough about that. Well, not necessarily enough about that because we do want to kind of give our final thoughts on the bowl game Clemson just played before we talk about some of the news this week. I've had a chance to go back and watch the Gator Bowl, and actually a couple of times because it was a fun game to watch, especially obviously that fourth quarter was pretty incredible.
Especially when you knew the outcome, right?
Yeah, it was a lot better on the rewatch knowing the outcome. I didn't have to sweat it out. I was like, even when Kentucky was hitting big plays, I was like, well, Clemson comes out on the right end of this. But we talked about in the post game, we weren't going to take too many big, big picture stuff, things. But we did want to highlight some of the positives, and on the rewatch, I think there were a lot of things. I specifically went back and rewatched that game to kind of give a critical analysis of how Cade Klubnik played in that game, because I think that's going to be the big talking point about how Clemson improves from this season. It definitely starts with the quarterback play, and while the numbers weren't incredible, I thought Cade played one of his better games on the season overall. And I don't think it was a great performance, and there were obviously a lot of mistakes in there, but he didn't really have a single game where he didn't have a lot of mistakes. Some just had more than others, and I thought this one, I thought he played pretty well. I think a lot of the issues kind of stemmed more from the offensive line play than him. And on the rewatch, there were times where Clemson's offensive line was getting absolutely like dominated. We told you guys in the pregame that Kentucky's defensive line was one of the better ones they would see all year. And they certainly showed it. 8 sacks. That's the most Clemson has given up since that opener against Georgia back in 2021. And I don't know how Cade managed. And there were a lot of other plays where he wasn't sacked, where he just got the ball out or threw it away. There were 2 intentional groundings in this game, and obviously the big one on the final drive. There was just a lot of, and I think there wasn't a whole lot of complimentary run game for him in those first 3 quarters either. But I thought for the most part, he managed the game pretty well. 30 for 41 is definitely one of his better efficiency games. And, I think some of the things that I had gripes with were just seeing the field quicker. When plays were there, he's got to be able to hit them. There were quite a few plays on the rewatch where it was a good play call, dialed up, got a guy wide open, especially in the red zone. And he was late and didn't throw it. And it cost you points at times. But I thought he actually played okay. And I thought the final drive was one of his best games, just one of the best single, moments from his season, like all year. That was, outside of the intentional grounding, but where there was pressure in his face and he had to try to make a play. He played perfect, and he had the heart, and he was accurate. Put the ball right on the money, put it where his receivers could get it, and his receivers and his tight end made plays for him. So I thought that was a real positive, from that game. I don't know what you saw, but I felt like a lot of the issues on Friday offensively were stemmed more from just the offensive line getting their butts kicked at times.
Yeah, and look, that's one of the things that I think has been consistent for Clemson so far this season. Throughout the entire 2023 campaign was inconsistent play on the offensive line. We saw it early as, a couple injuries happened to the Clemson offensive line. You saw that the depth that some of the coaching staff talked about coming into the season maybe wasn't quite as robust as they kind of let on in fall camp. And you saw when some of that depth was called on due to injury and other things, that it wasn't really ready to be there consistently. You would see, there'd be a couple offensive linemen that would come in, kind of role player guys, kind of bench guys, second level guys, and they would come in and they'd have a great game. And then the very next game, they would be called on again, and they wouldn't look anything close to what they looked in the previous game. So it was just a lot of inconsistent play along the offensive line. And I think you saw a lot of that show up in the bowl game against Kentucky, and that was to be expected. We talked about it in the pregame when we were previewing the matchup that, how much Clemson's offensive line could struggle, particularly against the interior of that Kentucky defensive line, which was extremely stout.
Walker is really good, guys. Yeah, he's only a true sophomore too. That he single-handedly blew up plays in the game. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw our buddy Harris Sewell get abused by him a couple of times, which, again, Harris Sewell's a freshman. He's obviously going to develop and get a lot better. You would expect under a coach like Matt Luke, who's now Clemson's new offensive line coach. But I saw him specifically get abused at that right guard position quite a few times by that interior of Kentucky's defensive line. And I think, it's always easy when you're looking at a play to blame it on the quarterbacks, especially when you see a wide receiver streaking down the field wide open, or, there's a miss here or a miss there. And, I think back to that interception that Cade threw directly after the defense came up with a turnover in the end zone, right? He had Jake Brenningstool running right up the seam wide open for a walk-in touchdown. and he's hit from behind while he's releasing the ball, which causes it to float to the middle of the field and become an interception. Safety's right there. He intercepts the ball, and then it's a bang, bang, double turnover, right? 2 plays in a row, 2 turnovers, one by Kentucky, one by Clemson. So it's things like that that also happen. Like, make no mistake about it, Cade needs to develop. This offseason, Cade has work that he needs to do. And I'm sure the coaching staff has shared at length what he needs to develop on and what they want to see him work on this offseason. But he's not the only problem with the Clemson offense.
No.
The offensive line has to, transform. We really need them to transform. They don't have to just get better this offseason. They have to transform. We're going to be starting a new center. Who's it going to be? I don't know. Some would think it'd be Ryan Lithicum. That's the most, logical thought. He was a 5-star recruit. We recruited him to be a center. Thoughts are that he would transition perfectly in that position. Will that happen? I don't know. But the offensive line really has to kind of transform itself and become far more consistent this season. And we need to build some depth there, some true depth. I know coaches, our coaching staff has talked in the past about how we had, 10, 11 guys we could go win with. Well, we saw this year that was not the case. You had 10, 11 guys that could walk out on the field and play offensive line, but not necessarily winning football at offensive line, right? And then the other part of it is the receiving core has to develop as well. But I think you saw some promising things, both by Cade, the receiving core, and even the offensive line at times in the game. You saw flashes of what this offense could be. None more than that final drive where I think Cade went like 8 for 8 or something like that.
8 for 8 for 71 yards.
Yeah, 8 for 8 for 71 yards. I can't think of a better way for as up and down as the season was for Cade Klubnik and this offense. I can't think of a better way for them to cap off the 2023 campaign than by a 71-yard game-winning drive that everyone in the stadium, probably all the Clemson fans as well, when they walked out on the field to start that drive, were like, you know what, man, I don't know if we got this. I don't know if this offense is capable of going 71 yards and winning the game, but guess what? They got the job done. Cade was in rhythm. That tempo, Dabo talked about it at the end of the game, how big that tempo was and how much more comfortable Cade looked making his reads in rhythm while the offense was running tempo. So maybe that's something you see a lot more next year. Hopefully the game slows down for Cade. Hopefully he can see the field better. Hopefully we don't have Troy Stellato streaking down the field wide open, getting frustrated all the time, and Cade's starting to make those throws with the proper protection. So, good game overall when you look at the highlights of it. Was there, some bad? Of course. But, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism for this offense heading into 2024.
Yeah. And I think really just the thing that, struck me the most was, I think the receivers, played well. They showed up, I think. They got open. And, sometimes Cade didn't hit them, but, when the ball was thrown their way, they mostly caught it and they came down with it. When it was a good, accurate ball. I know Troy Stellato is, probably still feeling that one hit he took over the middle, that hospital ball, but that Cade gave him. If I were him, I was like, you got to see me after this game in the locker room, like, because you're trying to give me early onset CTE. But I really thought the receivers and Jake Brenningstool as well, Jake Brenningstool especially actually played really, really well. And that was, Adam Randall, I thought had one of his better games. I thought that 3rd and 10 that he got just by sheer will, like he caught it short of the sticks and just shed like 2 or 3 different guys and got the first down. That's the Adam Randall that people have been telling us about. Like that was
absolutely
that was a big time play, and was a big part of that drive. So I thought Troy Stellato showed up in spots. Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown are guys that have been limited at different points in the season with injury, but they made some big plays in that second half. Obviously, Antonio Williams on that final drive. Tyler Brown made a couple of really big catches on Clemson's, touchdown drive. what was that was that the second touchdown or the first or second touchdown drive of that half where he catches the quick screen for a big gain, and then they do the little reverse down to the goal line. That was the reverse down to the goal line. That actually was that was a field goal drive after the turnover.
Yeah.
But still, big play. Big plays, and obviously nobody was more impactful in the receiving game than Jake Briningstool. 9 catches, 91 yards, caught everything his way, made some tough hands catches, like with guys over on him. It wasn't all just open catches and making yards after the catch. He had to make some tough hands catches, and he came up like that's the Jake Briningstool we've been talking about, and we've been wanting to see, and we saw at points this season. So here's to hoping that assuming he's coming back, that he's an even bigger part of the offense, because I thought you saw some growth there.
Yeah, you definitely did, and look, there's just like we've talked about in the past, Jordan, about this offensive line room not being devoid of talent. Contrary to popular belief, this wide receiver room is not devoid of talent either.
Right.
I mean, there are some dudes there. Have they all played up to their potential up to this point? No. Do we have some new, fresh help on the way? Absolutely. And TJ Moore and Brian Wesco, we'll get at them a little bit later when we talk about their all-star games and some of the performances they've been putting on in high school and stuff. But, it was good to see Jake Briningstool, like you talk about. He looked physical out there. You talk about some of the contested catches he made in that bowl game. I mean, he really kind of took over and was pretty much unstoppable for the most part. Kentucky couldn't deal with him. Even when they covered him well, he just used that big body. He boxed out the safety or the cornerback and went up there and got the ball. And that's what you expected to see more of him doing this season. We didn't see as much as we wanted to, but again, you see what he's capable of. Hopefully we can parlay that into, some momentum heading into spring and see some more of that. Same thing with Adam Randall. I thought he looked a lot more physical out there on that field, using that big body he has, using that speed, looking a little bit more confident out there. And if you can get guys like that to really come into their own and use their size and use their strength and use their ability, they're going to be great compliments to some guys that we got coming in, and then some of the speedsters we have in Stellato and Turner, and guys like that, and then your quicker twitch guys and Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown. We do have. That's one of the things I will say about this receiver room. At a certain point, Clemson started to look just all the same at wide receiver. We do have a very different skill set in our wide receiver room, and I think it's a pretty complete room. Can't wait to see what TJ Moore and Brian Wesco come in and do. But I think it could be a good room heading into next season.
Absolutely. And I mentioned on the Briningstool, I mean, I mentioned his stats. I mean, he probably should have had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, because they drew up 2 perfect plays in the red zone. One time Cade was late and had to throw it out of the back of the end zone. The other time he got hit, missed whiff block, and that was the interception. So, and also I think one of the underrated plays he made was on Phil Maffa's last touchdown, where he basically came in and pulled Phil Maffa as he was driving his legs, and that was big boy. That SEC football that Mark Stoops and Kentucky were talking about during before the game.
Absolutely.
That was a big deal. I thought he showed a lot of heart in that game, and gave me a lot of excitement and some reason to feel optimistic about where Clemson is at from a skill position and pass catching standpoint heading into next year.
Absolutely. I mean, he basically tackled Phil Maffa into the end zone, just drug him in there with him. And then Phil Maffa pumping them legs and not giving up. It's good stuff to see, man. I think we're trending in the right direction, but we'll see how it goes. And then you look over to the other side of the ball, the defense, when it comes to the Gator Bowl, and you saw young dudes all over the field, right? I think both of our starting cornerbacks for the Gator Bowl were true freshmen, Avian Terrell, and Luke, who else was over? Excuse me.
Shelton Lewis.
Shelton Lewis. Thank you. Shelton Lewis over there. I almost said Lucas, but he was hurt.
Yeah. He's perpetually hurt.
Yep. Just dude can't get right. If he can ever get right, he's a really good player.
Yeah, he's really former 5-star, number one
yeah,
player in South Carolina. Yeah.
just can't stay on the field for long stretches of time.
Yeah.
But Shelton Lewis, he had his moments in the game, right? Had a couple grow up moments, and had some rough moments where he had some busted coverage, and maybe didn't play as well as he wanted to at times in the game. But you saw his ability. You saw him with pass breakups. You saw him make great plays, great open field tackles, and then what better to do than seal the game with an interception to just kind of put the exclamation on it. Young corner out there, overcoming adversity at times in the game, and just finishes. So our secondary is in great hands as well.
And what's interesting, you mentioned Shelton Lewis, and he had some moments in that game where it looked like he looked like a true freshman. But honestly, when I went back and rewatched it, honestly, I thought he played a much better game than it appeared. I thought actually a lot of the coverage busts were the safeties, which was kind of surprising. R.J. Mickens and Jalen Phillips, love those guys. Jalen Phillips played his last game. I thought Jalen Phillips did not play very well in that game. And he had some moments where he got washed. He bit on play action too much. And there were some wide open, especially when they were, when his responsibility was to be deeper than the deepest. Sometimes he got sucked in. On those big passing plays, I thought that was actually more on the safeties. So that was kind of surprising because the safeties have been, those two guys have been experienced and two of the best players, but they did not play very well. And obviously Jalen Phillips was coming back from injury, so he hadn't played that much football. So it's easy to forgive him. But I think that's more of a reason to feel good about your young guys, because I thought they actually played better than maybe their veterans actually made them look at times. So that was good to see. And obviously the defensive line and the front seven in general, I thought they played really well. Had some moments, but lapses here and there. But for the most part, they played really well. And on a down-to-down basis, Kentucky was not very they were not very efficient. They just hit explosive plays on coverage busts, and it's a great formula, and they hit a lot of them. But when you're trying to, as far as putting together long scoring drives, they were not able to do it. They had a lot more 3 and outs than they had, going down the field, multi-play, 7, 8, 9 plus play drives. They didn't really have any of those. It was all of their touchdown drives were 5 plays or less. So, so you got to clean up the explosive plays. That's you can't just say, well, if you take those out, then they had a really good game. So I don't want to be that kind of guy. But
that's easy to say, right?
Yeah, but I think from a down-to-down basis, it wasn't as bad as maybe the numbers, especially the score would make it look. And you just got to clean up the explosive plays, and you're going to have you get R.J. Mickens back. Jalen Phillips obviously is going to move on. Interested to see where he ends up. I don't think he'll be a particularly high draft pick if he gets drafted at all, but he's been a really, really great player. So a guy that Clemson has to replace his production, because he, when he played, he was a very valuable member of that defense. So, but get like I said, you get Mickens back. That's huge. That's a huge shot in the arm for the young safeties. Sherrod Colville, especially a guy that I'm just waiting to have his kind of moment to break out. And I think he'll be asked to step into a bigger role next year. So, but I still feel really good about where the secondary is right now, despite how they looked at times.
Yeah, and you saw flashes of a guy like you mentioned Sherrod Colville. You saw flashes of him last year. When he was called on a bit more due to injuries and stuff like that in Clemson's defense, and he played well when he was out there and showed flashes of how good he can really be. So, and then you bring in a guy like Gibson and Tavoy Fegan. Those guys are coming in as true freshmen. They look to be, really good players, and I'm sure will get spun up quickly as well, as we've seen some of these freshmen become impact players in their freshman season. So the defense is in good hands. I think you get Agent Zero back for another year. You're still looking extremely deep in the defensive tackle position.
Oh yeah,
Defensive end still something we got to work through and figure out. Although I do think Kay Denhoff probably had his best game as a Clemson Tiger in that Gator Bowl.
yeah, he has some really good moments in that.
Does that translate, consistently into next season? I don't know. I'm just saying, quick observation from the Gator Bowl. I saw Denhoff making several plays, and you really haven't seen much of him, this season. So, we'll see what those dudes kind of do and develop under new coach. Same thing with the offensive line. I think changes are starting to be made. The big one is offensive line for me. We've talked about it at length on this channel that there's no excuse for Clemson not to have one of the elite offensive lines in the country. With the success that we've had and the recruiting base, the area that we're in, we should have our pick of offensive linemen, and it hasn't worked out for us. But hopefully, with a coach like Matt Luke now, we can get that turned around and get much, much better along the offensive line.
Absolutely, and like it starts with the line. I mean, this program has prided itself on being a line of scrimmage team on one side of the ball, but not the other. And it doesn't make sense to me. So I mean, you've had these elite dominant defensive lines for years now, and but offensive line has been consistently when it's at best it's been pretty good, and at its worst it's been pretty bad, and it just shouldn't be that way. There are teams that get far less talent at offensive line than Clemson that managed to put together, put a very capable offensive line on the field. And, at times, especially the last few years, you just have not seen that kind of play. So really excited. Matt Luke is a guy that is well respected, has put together some of the best offensive lines in the country when he, with his teams. And he's obviously his recruiting acumen speaks for itself. So I don't expect, Clemson to be out of it for some big time offensive linemen moving forward.
Yeah, look, man, I think it's going to be good. And then you got Chris Rump over there on the edge guys, the defensive ends. Hopefully we can bring back some of that elite defensive end play that Clemson's become accustomed to in the past through our playoff runs and stuff like that. So, yeah, getting back to hard-nosed elite line of scrimmage football on the defensive side of the ball, and then really becoming that along the offensive side of the ball. But I think the Gator Bowl showed some good things. Obviously, you can't take away any absolutes from any bowl game ever, but I think there were some positive things to take. I mean, there were also negative things, but again, I just choose to believe that Clemson has, Dabo has made some of the changes that we wanted to see. So we got to hope that these players on the roster start to develop under new coaching, and that we can get a whole lot better in year two as an offense under Garrett Riley. It didn't look like we thought it would in year one under Garrett Riley. Hopefully year two, get a little bit better in the skill position, get a little bit better along the offensive line, and try to turn the corner and make it look a little bit more like a Garrett Riley offense that we expected when he was hired on at Clemson.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have any more, big thoughts on the Gator Bowl. You ready to kind of dive into some of the news this week, some of the stuff that's happened this week?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll dive into it. Appreciate everybody getting in here. I see we got John Diamato in here. Appreciate it. He's from the Michigan channel over there. Thank you for coming to hang out with us, man. Really appreciate it. But no, Kate is not transferring, John. There's just people in here talking hypotheticals, I think. But yes, everybody hit that like button. Like John said, subscribe to the channel. Me and Jordan are trying to grow this channel as much as we possibly can. Appreciate you guys all being here and supporting the channel. We got 57 people in here right now. Really do appreciate you guys hanging out, talking Clemson football, talking college football with us. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into some big news out of Clemson that happened just, what was it, yesterday?
Yep, last night.
Our boy Shipley finally announces his NFL decision. We've been talking about it on the channel for weeks. Everybody, it seems like every live stream we do on the channel, both doing game previews and post games, and then our weekly show. Is Shipley made his NFL decision? Do we think he's going to stay? Do we think he's going to go? Well, he cleaned it up for us, and Shipley decides to go pro. Shipley declared for the NFL draft. He thanked Clemson fans. He thanked his coaches, all his teammates, and he wraps up his career as a Clemson Tiger. And just thinking back to the Gator Bowl that we just covered, not to get too much into it, but it probably wasn't the type of game that he wished he would have had, but he went out on a 60-yard special teams return that set up a Clemson score that ultimately helped Clemson win the game. So although it's not a perfect moment, you don't want to obviously wrap up your college football career by being carted off on one of the injury carts to the locker room to get x-rays. But again, he helped his team. He left everything out on the line. Luckily, as we talked about last week, there's no structural damage to his knee. Everything checked out to be okay. He doesn't need surgery. Obviously, he's going to go through probably a little rehab and stuff to kind of get it right again, but he'll be full go for the NFL Combine and his NFL future. So, first and foremost, just shout out to Will Shipley. We thank him for, coming to Clemson. He definitely changed Clemson. He definitely contributed to the success of Clemson while he was here. He's a dynamic running back, both running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. You saw what he could do as a returner, obviously, in his last game as Clemson. Did it surprise you at all that he declared for the NFL? I kind of thought he was coming back. It didn't necessarily surprise me that he decided to go to the NFL, but I was kind of leaning on him. I was leaning more towards him coming back than I was him leaving. But again, either decision wouldn't have necessarily surprised me. So did it surprise you? And what were your thoughts when you heard about it?
No, it didn't surprise me. I was kind of in your boat. I kind of tended to lean that I was leaning. If I had to pick one way, I felt like he would come back, but this didn't surprise me. I knew that the decision he had gone back and forth on his decision multiple times. Throughout the month, really. One day he thought he was coming back. The next day he was like, I think I might be leaving. So I knew it was very fluid. And obviously, I think there is some. And me and John are on the same wavelength. But I do think his injury in that game kind of did, have some influence because running backs, as we all know, there's only so much tread on the tires that you have in your career. It's a very physically demanding position. Not many last that long in the league because it's such a physically demanding position. I think the average of running back lasts is like 4 to 5 years. You see the ones that last long, but you never hear about the ones that come in the league and are only there for a year or two and are already out of the league.
Right.
So the average, they don't last very long on average. And obviously Will Shipley is a guy that I don't think he's a high end NFL draft pick. So I think there's, I think he needs to, I think there was some kind of a decision that, hey, I think I need to go ahead and, take my chances now. Because, something like an injury could, I might not be lucky if that injury like that happens again. And, I don't want to jeopardize my chances of playing at all at the next level. So I think that made it makes a lot of sense. I understand it. But I did, lean towards him coming back. But, man, I do want to just commend Will Shipley on a phenomenal career. I mean, top 10 in pretty much every Clemson running back statistic, over 3,000 all-purpose yards, 33 touchdowns. Just was Clemson's, in times where Clemson offensively had pretty much nothing going for it, he was the lone bright spot. His freshman year, when especially when that 2021 Clemson offense was one of the worst I've seen in a while. He was a huge part of why they were able to have some success and won 10 games that year. And he took over games by himself at times. I think back to that Florida State game. I was at that game, and where he just flat out took over the fourth quarter and was the reason Clemson escaped with a win that day. The last year that hurdle against Louisville, like I played that over and over and over again. The big returns, the big runs, that he had some pretty spectacular moments while he was at Clemson. So I'm really excited for him and happy that he gets to take his chances at the next level, because he is a great player.
Yeah, look, man. You talked about some of the moments that Will Shipley had. He's got several posterizing moments as a Clemson Tiger, if you will. You talk about, Florida State's probably the most excited to see him go, just because he probably played that's probably the team that he played the best against throughout his career. When you look at it as a whole, he was definitely a thorn in the Florida State Seminoles. And Jackpot's probably pretty happy as well. Those of you that know Carolina Jackpot here on YouTube, probably pretty happy as well. For whatever reason, Shipley really irritated him. Every time he saw Shipley do anything good, he'd be screaming and yelling at Shipley. So, but yeah, man, I'm happy for him. I'm glad that he's finally made his decision, and that we know what it is. He definitely changed Clemson. He helped us win games that we would not have won without him. And that's the definition of a game changer as a player. And he's absolutely a really good back. How he translates to the NFL, I hope he has a really successful career. But I do think it's possible that, the almost injury in the Gator Bowl probably influenced his decision a bit. You heard him talk earlier this season in interviews about, running backs have a shelf life, and, he's alluded to those things throughout this season. So there were signs that he was, thinking about leaving. When he exactly made his decision, honestly, I don't know. He's the only one that knows exactly the point in time when he finally made up his mind of what he will do. But I think it was a back and forth decision, like he was telling the media heading up to the Gator Bowl, that, he would say some days, he was like, oh, no, I'm coming back. And then some days he'd be like, no, I'm going to the NFL, right? A real back and forth. But at the end of the day, he's got to make that decision for himself, and he's got to look in the mirror and weigh the pros and cons of, if he did come back for his senior year, how much could he improve his draft stock? And is that enough to risk injury, possible serious injury, for coming back a senior season? Obviously, he determined that, no, it was not worth it. He's going to go ahead and go to the NFL draft. So another Clemson guy, he's a graduate of Clemson. He laid it out on the field every single game for Clemson. Nobody can question Will Shipley's passion for the game. He may be a little too fiery at times, but at the end of the day, you knew that he cared about his team. You knew he cared about winning, and he wanted to do everything he could to help his team win. And he did nothing but that while at Clemson. He was, one of the great players that have played for Clemson. He'll be remembered for a long time, and I wish him well as he goes to the league. I hope he gets a real opportunity. I think he'll probably be a later round guy, but again, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you go to better situations when you're a later round guy, and hopefully he gets a true opportunity and gets to show what he can do, even if he just carves out a kind of a niche as a returner initially on special teams or whatever. I hope he gets an opportunity and does well.
Absolutely. But yeah, best of luck to Will Shipley. I guess the conversation now is, I think obviously, the outlook at the running back position is still really, really exciting. And, assuming, because we haven't gotten confirmation officially that Phil Mafah is coming back, but assuming that Phil Mafah is coming back, you still have your bona fide RB1, I think, at this point. I mean, Phil Mafah was your best back this year. Numbers tell you that, all of everything, efficiency, yards per carry, all of that. So, you still feel really good about your starting running back, but now it's the question of, you have a lot of guys in this room that I think the coaching staff really likes and is really high on. So who steps up, as that RB2? I don't think Phil Mafah is going to be a guy that that gets like 25 carries a game, 20, 30 carries a game. I don't ever really see that. That's not really how Clemson has traditionally operated as an offense. Even when they had, Travis Etienne, he didn't get, he didn't get that many carries per game. And obviously in years prior, when it was more of, two backs, you had, especially, the year, it was Tavian Feaster, Adam Choice, and a freshman Travis Etienne. There was a pretty balanced split there. When you had Wayne Gallman, Deshaun Watson was technically your second running back, but he ran for over 1,000 yards in 2015, and so did Wayne Gallman. So you kind of sort of had a two back system there. He was kind of your second back, and obviously in recent years it's been a pretty balanced split. Shipley got a lot of carries, but Mafah got carries, and those were kind of your two guys. So who steps up as that second back is kind of the question. And that's kind of yet to be determined. You have some guys already in the room that that the coaching staff really likes. Keith Adams Jr. Is a guy that I think he's been in the program a while now. And he is a load to deal with. Obviously, true freshman Jay Haynes is a guy that you saw a little bit. He had a kick return, a pretty nice kick return right before Clemson's last drive, and he showed some flashes earlier in the year. And you still had, Jarvis Green, and obviously you have the true freshman David Ajumame coming in, and he's a guy, 4-star recruit. You and I are really, really high on him. I think there's a lot of room for movement. So I'm just so who do you think kind of steps up as that second back? I think I have an idea, but I'm not very clear right now.
If I had to guess right now, I like you said, I'm very high on David Ajumame. I think he's going to come in and probably be in the mix somewhat. But if I had to pick a guy right now that I thought would develop into that RB2, I'm going to go with Jay Haynes right now. He's a guy. He's a speedster guy. He's kind of the opposite of what a Phil Mafah is, and I think those guys could be a really good complement of each other. With Phil Mafah, just with his size and his physicality, just leaning on that defense over and over again. And then you bring in a guy in Jay Haynes and RB2 that's just a lightning fast dude, a home run guy. Every time he gets the ball, he could score, right? So he's got that breakaway speed, that change of pace type stuff that could really, keep a defense up at night when you got two guys like that in your backfield. And, I think those two guys could probably really complement each other really well. And, as much as I hate to lose, a guy of the caliber of a Will Shipley, this running back room is in really, really good shape when you just look at our depth. I mean, you mentioned, kind of all the guys sitting there laying in waiting. I mean, we got some dudes
Oh yeah.
behind Phil Maffa. Phil Maffa is obviously going to be RB1. He'll be the guy that we lean on the most. But, I mean, we got some dudes back there that'll be pushing for some playing time.
Absolutely, and you and I are on the same wavelength, same page. I think Jay Haynes is a guy that the staff is really. He was a late. He was a guy that not many people knew about when they took him. Played at Handley in Alabama, small school. I think they played 2A. But you turn on the film and you see the. I think you see the speed. I think that is what really jumps out to you. I think he probably has some physical development to do, but I think he's a guy that has a lot of big play potential as when he gets more comfortable in the offense, and he's a guy that Dabo when he's been asked about him is like he's just a guy that goes about his business and works, and that's kind of what you want in a running back. And he was like, I don't think I've seen him smile once, or he's not very talkative. He's just really about his business. And he's a guy that I was like, when I, late in that cycle, when, his name was first circulating around, I was like, I have no idea who this is. It was random, 3-star. I don't even think he had a rating at that point when his name first came up. But then you turn on the tape and you're like, okay, I can see why he's a guy they've had on the radar for a while. And I think from what we've seen early, it was kind of, in the limited sample size, it seems like the staff likes him a lot. And, he's gotten more opportunities than some of the older guys in the room, like, Keith Adams Jr. this year and Dominic Thomas, who obviously transferred out. And I thought it was interesting when Shipley went down, like he was, it was Adam Randall, and then it was him as the kick returner. Yep. So it kind of tells you, both of those guys can run. So if Haynes, well, Adam Randall can certainly run, and so if Haynes is in that room as well and considered an option, then that tells you a lot. And so I'm kind of a. We haven't seen a ton of him, but it's kind of a gut feeling right now. I think Jay Haynes is the guy that eventually steps up in that role. But we'll see. There's a lot of room for change there.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, anything can happen in that running back room, and I'm sure CJ Spiller will figure it out. He'll figure out the depth chart with those guys, and the best guy will hit the field. But I just like the idea of the combination between Maffa and Jay Haynes, just as far as complementing each other, which is completely different running styles, completely different skill sets, kind of keeps the defense off balance. And it's always good to have, two backs that do different things, but do them very well. So I think Jay Haynes will probably develop into that RB2 for us. Again, I'm not ruling out anybody else. You mentioned a Keith Adams Jr. He could obviously emerge. David Ajamume could come in and just blow everybody away, and he could take over the RB2 spot. There's really no telling. But the good part is we have more than one, legitimately good RB2 option behind Phil Maffa right now. And obviously we're assuming that Phil's coming back. This would obviously be a very different conversation should we be talking about Will Shipley and Phil Maffa both leaving. Luckily for now, all we're dealing with is, Will Shipley deciding to go to the NFL. I don't think Maffa's going to go anywhere. But if he did, the running back room's a little bit thinner, but again, we do have good depth there. I don't think we got a guy like Phil Maffa on the depth chart. But again, it's something we would have to figure out. But again, I don't suspect that'll be something Clemson will have to deal with, especially now that Will Shipley left. Phil Maffa knows that he's kind of going to be the guy. So hopefully we can convince him to stay around one more year because he could have a monster season, especially if we are going with the assumption that Matt Luke is going to be able to figure out some things along this offensive line, make them more consistent. I mean, Phil Maffa could be throw up, eye popping stats this next season.
Oh yeah. He nearly had 1,000 yards this year, and there were games this year where you were like, he should have gotten way more carries.
Oh yeah.
So if Phil Maffa is your RB1 next year, which I feel fairly confident that he will be, then you're in a good spot, and I think it's just about who steps up behind him. And I'm high on where the room is right now, and the future. So, I think CJ Spiller has shown that in his limited time as running backs coach, that his guys are going to be. He's gotten these guys ready to play. We saw it with from 2021, with Shipley and Maffa coming in and getting those guys ready to go when they needed them to be. It was a big deal, and they've been your 1-2 punch for 3 years now. And the guys behind them, when they got in, they played well. Keith Adams Jr. is a guy that has flashed a ton when he's played, and I think they've had some really good evals at that position. And we talked about Dominique Thomas, a guy that I think is going to have a really big year for Georgia State next year. And then I like the takes that they had as true freshmen this past cycle with Jay Haynes and Jarvis Green. So I feel good about where the room is, and obviously the future. David Ajumame coming in, and Gideon Davidson and the 2025 class is a guy I'm stoked about. So I'm happy with where things are. I think if Maffa does choose to go pro, then I do think there's a different conversation to be had, because now you don't have a bona fide RB1, and you got to get somebody ready, or you got to look at somebody in the portal.
Right.
So that's the one thing that Shipley waiting so long to make this decision does mean, is that, man, if Maffa decides not to come back, now you're kind of in a bind.
Yeah,
so
you're really
see how that goes.
Yeah, at that point, Clemson would be really, really late in the game with even trying to find a portal guy if they decided to go that way. That would be a difficult thing, finding a running back one this late in the cycle. You may be able to get a guy maybe after spring or something like that, but this late in the transfer portal cycle would be a tough ask if you lose both your top guys in the backfield. So hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Hopefully Maffa will announce officially here soon in the next week or so, or he'll just leave us on red. He'll just be like, you guys will find out.
Yep. That it's kind of like what Tyler Davis did last year, where it was like, is he leaving for the NFL or not? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, he showed up at team meetings in January and things, but I don't think he ever made a formal announcement he was coming back. He just came back.
And I could totally see Maffa doing that. Like, I could totally see him like not making some big Instagram post or Twitter post or anything like that, and just going about his business like he always has. Like last year when he wasn't eligible, just hey, nope, didn't say anything, because he thought about transferring last year.
Yeah,
but you never heard him make any official statements. He just kind of didn't transfer, and then showed up to team meetings. So I could totally see him doing that. It would be kind of funny. I'm just going to assume, until I hear otherwise, that Maffa is coming back. He's our RB1 next year, and I couldn't be happier that he's going to be the RB1. Running back room's in great hands. CJ Spiller is going to spin him up and figure out who that second dude's going to be behind Maffa, complementing his running style and ability. And we're full steam ahead into 2024. Looking for improvement, looking for development, and hoping that we can, keep this thing going, man. But again, in good health. All right, let's talk about some of these young dudes that are coming in to help aid this offense a little bit and this defense really in 2024. We got a couple guys for Clemson that have been invited to and involved in some of these all-star games. I know we're probably going to hit heavy on Brian Wesco and TJ Moore. Those are obviously the big highlights of this class, along with Sammy Brown on the other side of the ball. Some big names have been landed in this class. And these dudes are, all over the place right now, going to their various all-star games, heavily involved. Some of them are limited due to injury. So what have you seen from some of these Clemson commits out there in the all-star game? How do they look stacked up against some of the more elite talent in the country?
Yeah. Obviously there were two, big all-American, high school all-star games this week. Obviously the one from Under Armour, and then the All-American Bowl on NBC. And there were Tigers at both of these events. TJ Moore and Christian Bentaker, I believe, were the two at the All-American Bowl, and I thought both of them had pretty outstanding performances. TJ Moore in particular was a guy that they consistently raved about. Both days, just dominating one-on-ones, just a smooth route runner, very physically gifted for his size, the hands, just all of it. You see some of the clips that were coming out in practice, and he's making one-handed catches and one-on-ones, and he flat out on a sluggo route, he just flat out, the DB grabbed, tried to PI him, and he just muscled him off of him, and he fell down, and he was wide open. It was pretty, it reminded you of some of the Clemson wide receivers of old. He's different. I don't like to talk about rankings too much on here. We kind of mentioned them when we talk about recruits. We kind of mentioned them in passing, and then we kind of move on, and we don't really gripe about where they're placed. TJ Moore is pretty high in the 24/7 sports composite. I think he's I know he's top 100. And obviously the composite ranking takes into account 24/7. They're in 24/7 sports in-house ranking, Rivals, On3, and ESPN. I think they still include ESPN. I don't know if they took them out or not, but TJ Moore is pretty high up there on pretty much all of it. He's a top 100 recruit on 24/7 sports, On3, and ESPN. The one site that has him significantly low, and is the only reason his composite score is lower, is Rivals. And Rivals has him as, I believe, the 241st player in the country.
That's a shame.
And the 41st ranked wide receiver in the country.
Come on, Rivals, do better.
I don't know who does the evaluations over there. He is not there are not 40 wide receivers better than TJ Moore. There's just not. There's not even close to 40 wide receivers better than TJ Moore. I think he's a 5-star talent. When I just, from watching his film, and from obviously these All-American Bowl practices, he was a standout performer and one of the best players in the entire, just regardless of position. He's a 5-star player.
I mean, you can see him. I mean, I didn't watch all of it, but I mean, just looking at his individual, I mean, he's out there abusing these corners, man. He's making some of them look silly. Yeah. And he's just, just his route running, his explosiveness, his ability to just go up and get the ball regardless of what the DB is doing, is you start to be excited about a guy like TJ Moore, right? He looks like a guy that's a a wide receiver run, right? That alpha dog mentality, right? And I think that's been the key missing in Clemson's wide receiving room for several years now. Is just that alpha dog, that wide receiver one, that dude that like you can look to and be like, when we need a play, that's who we go to. Like a Mike Williams, right? You knew when Mike Williams is on the field and Clemson needed a play, they were going to Mike Williams, but he was still going to go out there and make a play, right?
Yep.
That type of receiver that, regardless of what's going on in the game, that dude can look over at his quarterback and be like, "I got you. Just throw it up. I'm gonna go get it. Don't worry about it." Right? And Clemson hasn't had one of those, and he looks to be a receiver that could fill that huge void that has been in Clemson's wide receiver room for several years now.
Absolutely. Just he's one of the more complete wide receivers in this class. Just from physical standpoint, he's got the ideal size you want. He has great downfield speed. Like he gets separation, and he's a smooth route runner. Like I think there's not a whole lot of weaknesses. When you watch him, he's really, really good. He's a 5-star. I know my opinion is, it is kind of, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but just when I watch him play, he's elite. And excited to get him on campus. I know he will be a summer enrollee because Tampa Catholic does not allow their players early release. So is what it is. But he's a guy I think that regardless can come in and play early. I mean, we've seen two receivers, a freshman receiver 2 years in a row, a freshman summer enrollee two years in a row come in and be a big time contributor right away. And Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown. So TJ Moore absolutely could have that same track. So thought he played really well. I mentioned Christian Bentancur. He was another big standout, just a matchup nightmare. He was really, really tough to deal with one-on-ones, just really natural hands. And he has really good downfield ability, and the physical tools as well are really, really exciting. He's one of the better tight ends. I think one of the more complete tight ends that I think Clemson has gotten in quite some time. So really excited to get him here as well. And he's really good. And those were the two at the as I said, those were the two at the All-American Bowl, and they both had really, really good standout performances. So that was exciting. And then obviously the Under Armour Bowl, there were more Clemson signees: Bryant Wesco, Elijah Thurman, Tavoy Fegan, Corian Gibson obviously is hurt, so he wasn't able to play. Sammy Brown is also hurt, wasn't able to participate. But those guys had big weekends as well. I thought the guy that had the best was Elijah Thurman. He was a guy that I consistently heard about was really, really good, especially in practices. He just was really, really tough to deal with. He's very physically, just imposing already. And he's a guy that I think potentially could come in and work his way into the rotation as a freshman. I thought he was the guy that really stood out the most. Brian Wesco, I thought he had a good day, not the best, but I thought the game itself, he had some really nice plays, but I think he was on team fire, and I don't know who put together that offensive line for Team Fire in that game, but that was god awful. And the quarterbacks that they had weren't particularly great. Although it did make me laugh that one of them was a South Carolina commit, Dante Reno. So that was I got some amusement out of that, but it was frustrating watching the game because Wesco was getting open and nobody would see him. A player wouldn't see him, and that was pretty frustrating. That was pretty awful because he was, Bryant Wesco is a guy that I think shines more in game and you saw him. He had a couple of nice catches for first downs, but largely it was the offensive line was getting dominated. The quarterback wasn't even really attempting to read the field, and he was not getting the ball. So that was frustrating. So that was it. But I think Elijah Thurman of those guys had the best day. And then I mentioned Taboy Fegan. I thought he had a really good camp as well. Tigers out in full force in these All-American type bowls, and I thought they all had pretty nice performances for the most part. So, and it kind of showed why they were exciting, and why this staff was so high on them. So, yeah, this recruiting class I'm really, really high on, and nothing that happened yesterday did anything to make me feel different. I'm really excited about the guys in this class. So I don't know if you got to catch any of it, but
yeah, no, I mean, I didn't get to catch much of it. Been a pretty busy week for me. Obviously, I just looked up and saw highlights of kind of individual drills and stuff like that. Didn't really get a chance to watch the games, but it's nice that Clemson's out there being represented well in these All-American, All-Star games. Players are showing why they got their ratings and who they are, and you just can't wait to get most of these dudes on campus, man. A lot of them are going to be mid-year enrollees, so they'll be there for spring practice. You think about TJ Moore, he'll be a summer guy, but again, he's already physically ready right now to walk on the field and play at Clemson. So, and as you alluded to earlier, we've had back-to-back seasons where summer enrollee wide receivers have been kind of the breakout wide receiver for the team. And I expect that TJ Moore could probably repeat that for a third season. Go Tigers is on here. 6'3", 195, runs a 4'3", low 4'4", 10'6" guy. I mean, crazy. The dude is nuts.
He's pretty. Yeah, he's pretty. Like I said, pretty complete. The measurables are there. The film is there certainly. And just I think he's a guy he's the plug and play type receiver that can make an early impact. And I think he's going to be a good one. I think. Again, there's no sure things in recruiting, so we're over here raving about these guys, and but at the end of the day, I'm going to stand on my takes. But it's recruiting. It's always a crapshoot, but I think as much confidence as you can have in a lot of these guys, I think there is, at least for me. And really excited to get these guys on campus.
Yeah, man, it's going to be good. Help is on the way. And boy, do we need it at some positions. And we got it coming. Recruiting has been doing really well, but I mean, we'll see how it looks come spring practice. But we got 62 people in here right now hanging out with us. We really do appreciate you guys showing up, hanging out with us, chopping it up about Clemson football, college football, everything in between. That's kind of everything we wanted to get to tonight. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys in the comment section. If you guys got any questions that you want to ask me or Jordan, or any topics that you would like us to cover before we get out of here tonight, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Give you guys a few minutes to get your comments and your questions in, and then we'll wrap this show up and see you guys next Thursday, 7 p.m. Again, those of you that haven't heard me say it yet, this show will continue throughout the offseason every Thursday, 7 p.m. Until we tell you otherwise. Me and Jordan will be right here talking Clemson football, talking college football, and everything in between. We'll probably hit a couple other sports while we're at it. Basketball, baseball, all that kind of stuff. Quick updates on those type of sports, and then get right back into the football talk. Got spring practice coming soon. Still got recruiting being done out there to some extent. Still got guys leaving. We just recently had another transfer. Um, Guy that kind of surprised me that he transferred. Not that he left. I thought Brandon Spector was not going to be on Clemson in 2024. I expected him to leave. I didn't really expect him to transfer. I thought he would just that would be the end of his college career, but he's looking to continue it somewhere else. So, shout out to him. Hopefully he lands somewhere.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Spector is an example of a guy that, and kind of an example of Dabo's philosophy that he's not going to, I think there are some people that, just want him to push guys out and stuff like that. And I don't think that's ever going to be a situation where he does that. I think there are times if a guy has been in the program, he's graduated, he has his degree. I think there are times where he's like, okay, he's upfront about where his position is in the depth chart and where where he could potentially sit. And he's like, well, if you need to look somewhere else, then we're going to help you do that. And I think that's kind of what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Spector is a guy that has his degree. He's been in the program a while. I think he has technically 2 years of eligibility, which is crazy to think about, not just one. And so I think he's going to get a shot. He wants to go and get a shot to play a lot more somewhere else. I think that's the best move for both parties because I did not expect him to be a factor really in the wide receiver room moving forward. So best of luck to him. He put out some of his practice tape, and it was, I watched it and I was like, okay, wow, that's pretty. He looked pretty good. And you're just like, man, why didn't really? I mean, we saw you play at times, and you didn't make those kind of plays. But we have some guys that have looked great in practice, and it's a difference, translating it to on the field. No matter how much, how many times you rep certain things, you have to be able to do it on the field. So, but best of luck to Brandon. Obviously, a younger brother of Balin Spector, who is still in the league. I think he's on the Bills. I believe he's primarily a special teams guy, but I think he's managed to carve out a roster spot for himself. So,
Hey,
shout out to Balin Spector.
Ain't nothing wrong with being a special teams guy. He's still getting paid.
Still getting paid. Like that's and hey, I was a pretty big Balin Spector fan while he was here. I thought he was a guy that kind of flew under the radar, but he was a really, really solid linebacker for a good while, and he ended up getting drafted. I was kind of surprised he got drafted, but he stuck around in the league too, and so I think that's a testament to kind of what Clemson has done as far as their development at linebacker. Obviously, a lot of Spector's career was under Brent Venables, but just kind of, he's just a really solid football player, and honestly, probably a little bit more athletic than people gave him credit for. And he's been a good special teams guy for the Rams. So, not the Rams, the Bills. So, shout out to him, and shout out to Brandon, and best of luck to him wherever he ends up.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck to him. Hope he lands on his feet. Hope he carves out a starting position wherever he goes. So. Always wish those guys the best when they decide to move on. They put in their time, and they weren't going to crack the rotation. So, you got to move on, or just quit playing football.
Yeah, like I said, people think that Dabo doesn't, nudge guys out. He's not going to nudge anybody that doesn't graduate. That's just the reality. Like I think he feels like he has a, and I think a graphic came out that, well, not just a graphic, but Clemson's graduation rate, or GSR rank, which basically compiles like a rating of like how many kids Clemson graduates per year. It was like 99% over the last 8 years.
Yep.
That's number one in the country, better than literally anybody.
Yep.
Not just at the FBS level. And it was the highest rating like since GSR was being calculated. So, Dabo is, when he brings guys in, he brings them in with the full intention of, hey, maybe you don't end up becoming a starter or a contributor here, but we're going to make sure that you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a Clemson degree. And then after that, we can have conversations about, if you need to go somewhere else and get playing time, we'll help you do that. But I think Dabo has a clear mission about how he wants to manage his roster and his players, and his mission is a part of his mission as a football coach and as a mentor, especially, is making sure that they graduate. And so, and then we can have conversations about going somewhere else. So.
Absolutely.
That's all. Let's actually dive into you guys' questions. Spaceman, he asks, what is stopping Dabo from using the portal? He has not been able to keep his team afloat by simply recruiting players. Well, I don't think there's anything stopping Dabo from using the portal. And I think we've seen Dabo attempt to use the portal. I think Clemson is kind of in a unique situation right now. I've maintained multiple times, and we've talked about multiple times, I wish Clemson had gone after particular guys of this cycle. And I wish they had gone after some of those guys and just didn't end up getting them. And so I think Clemson's in a unique situation because the spots where they have needs are places where it's like you don't need they're not looking for a guy that needs to start right away. And they don't want a guy that's looking to be one and done and go to the league. That's not the kind of guys they're looking for. And they're not looking for a guy that wants a starting spot promised to him. And I think that's really the biggest thing. It's really hard. In recruiting, it is really, especially the portal recruiting, it's really hard to get guys to buy in, to come in and just be like, the only thing we can promise you is an opportunity to compete, because these guys are leaving situations most of the time where they were already buried in the depth chart and lost the starting or lost the starting spot and are looking for a place where they are guaranteed to play. And I understand it because you only get so many years of eligibility and you want to play. But in Clemson's situation, that makes it tougher to, it kind of shrinks your pool of guys you can go after, because if you're not going to promise guys starting spots, then, which, I don't believe in anyway, so I'm glad we don't do that. Then you're just not going to be in it for certain guys. And I'm not excusing the lack of portal usage so far. And there is a name that just that has kind of just been floated out there and has just entered the portal that Clemson has been in contact with along the offensive line. Seth McLaughlin from Alabama, former starting center for Alabama. Clemson is in contact with him, so we'll talk about that more if an offer comes out. But it's not, Dabo is not eschewing the portal. But there is a specific type of player that they're looking for, and those types of players are really tough to land because they are, one, looking for a job, a place where they feel really confident or they're guaranteed to start, and two, we have to address that. There's always an NIL component in some of these things, and depending on the player, you're competing with schools that flat out just have more to offer than you on that front. So
look, there's no secret that Clemson doesn't have this massive alumni base, right? That some of these other schools have the resources and the money that they can tap into. So obviously NIL is part of that. And I don't think Clemson is afraid to give out NIL money, or they're being quote unquote stingy with their NIL money. But you also have to take into account that this NIL money is not endless. It doesn't just fill up out of nowhere. You can't just, spend at will and just assume that it's going to fill back up, right? You have to budget it out. You have to spend your money smartly in order to get the most good for your money. So getting in a bidding war for somebody like Clemson is probably not the way that they're going to choose to spend majority of their NIL money, right? And then I think the biggest thing is what you hit on, Jordan, is Clemson's never going to offer a dude, not offer a dude. They're never going to guarantee someone out of the portal that they're going to walk in and start. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of these portal players are looking for. And a lot of teams are more than happy to tell them that. Whether they're telling them the truth or, just telling them something to get them on campus, I don't know. But it's just some of the way Clemson approaches things puts them at a disadvantage. So,
yeah. And
again,
that's just the reality. I mean, you only hear about because we're all so locked into Clemson, we're not always paying attention to what's going on at other programs, but other programs, especially of the caliber of Clemson, do have that issue to a degree. Alabama hasn't brought in a ton of guys. Georgia has one. They brought in Trevor Etienne, but outside of that, there are guys they are looking at that, and that they went after that they didn't end up getting because they couldn't promise them a starting spot. That's just that it's happening more often than we think, but we're also locked in on Clemson specifically and their issues. That we think it's like, it's solely a Clemson issue. But, when you're a program that has recruited at the level Clemson has and you're not in a position to guarantee starting spots to anybody, that's kind of the reality. Drew asks, what do you guys think about Clemson going after Corey Foreman from USC? He was once a Clemson commit. Yeah, that's a recruitment I remember very well. I think he still has that tiger tattoo on him. Drew, I feel like Clemson could do a lot better at edge, to be honest. I haven't been very impressed with Corey Foreman. He's been a guy that, at USC that, really never could lock down a starting spot. And you could say, USC's defenses have been terrible. And that could have hindered his development, but that also means, you were a 5-star recruit and you can't get on the field, for that defense, consistently for that defense. I don't know. I think Clemson would be better. I know that they are still, they still have the communication lines open for a take at defensive end. There aren't any names to track right now, but we'll see how things progress further into the cycle. Because, like I said, because if you didn't know, the portal window officially closed, so there won't be any new names entering, but guys can still, sign and enroll and all of that. There's no deadline for that. That's a school by school thing. So we'll see if something emerges, later this month, or maybe it's something that they don't really address till after spring practice. We don't know. And after that second portal window. So we'll see what happens there. But as far as Corey Foreman is concerned, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be like wholly against it, but I think Clemson could do a lot better. Yeah, frankly,
I agree.
Maybe he comes in and Chris Rump brings it out of him, but I don't think it's any more. I don't think at this point bringing in Corey Foreman, I feel like it's just getting another Cade Denhoff or Zaire Patterson, guys that came in pretty highly rated but haven't produced at all, and you already have those guys. I think Clemson wants a guy that they can rely on to plug in and play a lot at edge. And they've talked about potentially moving Peter Woods at edge, and that's something that prior to the season you and I had talked about. So and I think that's certainly on the table as well. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't know what you think about it, Craven, but I'm not all that.
I don't think that's a direction that Clemson needs to go at all. Do we need to keep our eyes peeled for possibly adding another edge guy? Yeah. I think we've made it pretty clear on here that that's a position of need. That's kind of a depth issue, if you will, for this Clemson team. But again, you got to add the right person. You don't want to just add somebody just for the sake of adding somebody. I never want that to be the case. Like, let's just add somebody via the portal just so we can add somebody and say, we got this guy out of the portal, right? If they can't contribute and make this defensive end room better, then I don't want them on campus. It's a waste of a scholarship, and we don't need them. And
I'd rather you. I mean, because at that point, it's like you're bringing in a guy. Yeah, I'd rather just if you're gonna play inexperience anyway, I'd rather you just play Cade Denhoff or maybe
that's what I'm saying.
Arian
And
Mayo or Adam Kasai and get those guys ready to play. Because
yeah, and if you're going to roll the dice on somebody, I'd rather you roll the dice on a high school guy that you're going to have 4 years with,
yeah,
rather than somebody you're going to have for a year or two out of the transfer portal. If you're rolling the dice on unproven, right?
right. If you can get a guy that has proven production,
yeah, absolutely, 100%.
then
You go for him. You go for him. We could absolutely use somebody with proven experience and production that would be willing to come to Clemson and all of that stuff. But if you're rolling the dice on a kind of an unproven guy that hasn't really done much in college so far, I just assume just give that scholarship to a high school guy and let Chris Rump develop that guy from freshman year up until the time that he's contributing to this defensive line. But again, that's for Chris Rump to sit there and evaluate. He knows what he's got in that room. He's going through the evaluation process now. I'm sure it will continue into spring practice. If he feels like he needs somebody and there's a roster spot available, I'm sure he'll go to Dabo and they'll go get somebody. But we got to trust that Dabo hired the right guy to lead that room, and he's going to have to make those decisions.
Yeah. And hey, listen, if I know we can't take too much from the bowl game, but Cade Denhoff looked pretty good, better than we've seen him, for a lot of his career, pretty, soon after Chris Rump got here. So I don't know. That could be just a coincidence and all that, but it's not a bad sign, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else are we talking about. See a lot of people. We have a super chat from Alexander, $10. Thank you so much for supporting the show. He says, great show. I'm so pumped that Michigan knocked out Bama, so there will be no SEC team in the Natty for the first time since 2015. Go Tigers. Yeah. I thought Michigan showed a lot of resolve in that game because it was when it was 20-13 Bama, I was like, oh man, but
yeah.
Man, if Michigan's about to, this is if there was a year for Michigan to go and win this whole thing, it's this year. I think the matchups, the roster that they have right now, they are in a prime position. And obviously the Harbaugh rumors keep circulating. It's like, how many more years are you going to deal with, him flirting with the NFL?
That's got to be frustrating as a Michigan fan. Like that would honestly piss me off if I was a Michigan fan to have to deal with that same song and dance every single offseason. I mean, it's just at a certain point, you got to be like, bro, come on, man. Either you want to be the Michigan coach or you want to go to the NFL. Which one is it? And I know he's done really good for Michigan, not taking, anything away from him. He's obviously, this is their third year in the playoff. They finally won a semifinal game. They're going to the national championship. That game against Alabama was crazy, dude.
Yeah.
That was an amazing game. So was the Washington and Texas game. I mean, they were both really, really good, intriguing matchups that you had to pay attention down to the very last snap. And happy for Michigan that they finally got over the hump and got the job done. And I know everybody who's not an SEC fan is probably pretty excited about not seeing the SEC in the national championship, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be really fun. It's exciting. I'm excited for this national championship game because these are two teams that neither one has played in the championship game in a long time. And they're still both of them are still relatively newcomers to the playoff. I mean, Michigan obviously is on their third year in a row, but before that they hadn't made it, and Washington had only made it once before.
Right.
And I think I'm gonna. I don't know if John Diadamo is still listening. He's probably going to hate me after this. I think I'm rooting for. Well, I think I'm going to pick Michigan, but I'm rooting for Washington.
Man,
Washington gives me so much Clemson vibes, like 2016 Clemson vibes. Like
Penix, dude, that dude, man, good Lord. His deep ball is beautiful.
It really is.
I mean, it is a thing of beauty to watch that dude throw a deep ball. And it's so perfectly placed.
Yeah.
It's so perfectly placed. Like 95% of the time, this dude's just like dropping it right in the breadbasket for the wide receiver. It's crazy how many deep balls I saw him throw in that Texas game. And you're just like, man, like this dude can't miss.
Just on a rope, and it wasn't even just the deep balls. It was the seam routes on just on a rope, like perfectly placed. It just
that dude. He is a nightmare for a secondary, man.
Yeah,
he is a nightmare.
His accuracy was just I don't know, like just some of the throws he was making was pretty incredible, and just the way this Washington team is built, especially the offense, it just like I said, it reminds me so much of 2016 Clemson, and you have the dynamic play, quarterback that can make all the throws, has a great deep ball, he has great just elite outside receivers, Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, McMillan, like they whatever. What is his name? Not McMillan. McMillan is at Arizona. Oh man, what's the other one? I'm blanking on the name right now. Someone will help me out. But they have elite receivers, and they have one. I think the one thing that they do have is
Go Tiger says McMillan.
Okay, it was McMillan. I get my Pac-12 receivers mixed up sometimes. But they are really, and the only thing that they do have that 2016 Clemson offense didn't have was a Joe Moore winning offensive line. But 2016 Clemson's offensive line was good enough. But Washington's offensive line has been incredible. Just from keeping Penix clean, giving him time to throw. But the big play potential and the receivers and the quarterback, it just reminds me of 2016 Clemson. So Washington has been a fun story, and I think it would be cool to see them close it out. They're a really fun team to watch, and so I think I'm going to go with Washington.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. Man, dude, it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be. It's funny that you keep kind of comparing it to a 2016 Clemson, because the game kind of lines up that way. If you look at Michigan, they look like Alabama did coming into that game.
The style of play.
The style of play is very Alabama-esque. A tough line of scrimmage team, a quarterback that can manage the offense, but he's not like this game breaker, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, the parallels. The more I think about it, the parallels that line up in that matchup is
and the way that Washington's and the way that Washington's season has gone too, because they've won. That 2016 Clemson team won so many close games. Mm-hmm. So is Washington. It seems like every game they've played has been a close game. The only difference is the semifinal game for 2016 Clemson was a 31-0 shutout, and obviously Washington. But I felt Washington controlled that Sugar Bowl the entire game. I don't know how I don't know how Texas managed to.
That's what I'm saying. Like
Washington felt like they had control the entire game, but they never they could never pull away.
It looked, especially in that second half, like Washington was really going to pull away.
Yeah.
In the game, but Texas just, to Texas's credit, they just wouldn't go away. They were not quitting. Yeah. They refused to be put away in that game, and they clawed their way all the way to the end. But yeah, I thought Washington controlled the game, majority of the game for the most part. It never felt like they were really going to lose. It just felt like that Washington offense could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. And there wasn't much Texas could do to really stop them.
Yeah, and I guess the other parallel is Dylan Johnson is a tough, underrated running back that has just been extremely productive, but nobody talks about.
Nobody talks about it.
Just like Wayne Gallman was.
Just like Wayne Gallman.
Like it really is. It really is crazy how similar these two teams are built, especially offensively. It's Washington gives me so much Clemson vibes, and like that's always exciting. And I'm going to root for teams that give me Clemson vibes for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So I'll be rooting for them, but not really mad either way, because I think it's just not, like I said, it's just nice not to have an SEC team in the playoff. But that again, that is a testament to the SEC and
Yeah,
kind of
man.
what they've, you know. Hey, listen, I'll be the one to knock the SEC when it's due, but you at the end of the day, that has been the best conference in football for
Well, I mean, look, it's as much
20
as
years now,
all
pretty much.
as much as us all lament the SEC and hate the fact that they are touted as the top conference in college football and they're given the benefit of the doubt time and time again. It's for a reason. Um, they've been at the top of college football for a very long time. So as much as all of us non-SEC folks hate it, uh, it's just it's the fact of the matter.
Uh, Will says, I don't want to deal with Michigan fans. Yeah, I understand why. Yeah, go
Yeah.
Huskies. Yeah, I certainly see why you have a rooting interest in this game. But we're on the same side, so that's good. Yeah, go Huskies, absolutely. Let's see. He says Notre Dame and Michigan have a Clemson, Georgia-like mutual hatred. That's a pretty good comparison as far as, because they don't play regularly,
Right.
but the regionality and the proximity makes it such a big rivalry. And they've played, they go at it for recruits, they go at it for regional dominance and prestige. That's kind of what the Clemson Georgia rivalry was, especially the last, Clemson and Georgia hadn't played much the last decade, but they have been two of the best programs in college football over the last 10 years. And then obviously the 80s were, it was rock fights basically every year. And, both teams won national championships in that decade. So obviously Notre Dame and Michigan have more history overall. But it's a similar style of rivalry, I'd say.
Yeah,
so that's
I can relate to that.
I think that's a good comparison.
Go Tigers said Washington fans are quiet even when they're good.
Well, and that's the thing, but like I've come across a lot of Washington, like they're a very passionate fan base, but they're not, and again that's why they give me such Clemson vibes, because Washington fans don't have a reputation of being obnoxious or anything like that. Like it's kind of like when opposing fans come to Clemson and they're like, oh man, the hospitality, like they treated us well. But obviously the game is it's a Death Valley is there's nothing like it. But the pregame and all of that, and how opposing fans are treated. I hear similar things about Washington, but their fan base is extremely passionate, and they pack that stadium out.
It's not like when you go to Willie B or go up there to Raleigh to North Carolina State or one of those places. They'll treat you like a piece of garbage up there.
They will.
Don't go up there, man.
Yeah, no, it's rough. It's rough as an opposing fan at both those stadiums. But yeah, I haven't heard this. But Washington, as far as their fan base is concerned, they give me like Clemson of the North vibes, the Northwest vibes. So, they give me a lot of those types of vibes.
Go Tigers said they throw batteries there. They do throw batteries.
They do throw batteries.
That's one that is confirmed. We have video evidence that is confirmed. They do throw batteries.
John says he has a different experience. He says, I'm not a troll, but I've only been blocked on X by Huskies fans. Go figure. Wow.
Oh, dang.
Well,
dang. What'd you do to the Husky fans, John?
But that shows you, I mean, every fan base has.
Oh, of course. Look.
Has their.
We all got them.
Yeah. Even Clemson.
We wish we didn't, but we all got them.
Yeah. No, Clemson certainly has their contingency especially online, of people who can be obnoxious, and
everybody's got that group of fans that they wish weren't associated with their team. Some fan bases it's bigger than others, but every fan base has it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else? Want to get? We've been kind of loving up on Washington. Just find one more. Let me see if there was any sort of one more Clemson question to kind of close us out. You might have to scroll back up. I just had it. Yeah, he had mentioned earlier that he's like, I'm assuming Clemson just doesn't pay for Yeah, you're never going to see Clemson just get a guy straight up in a bidding war. Like they're just, that's not something that they're really interested in. Clemson has, I think Clemson's NIL situation is in good shape, but the way that they use it is more for player retention. The guys that we want the guys that are here to be happy and we want to take care of them, but we're not just going to go out and throw whatever money is out there on like that's to get you to come here. Like that's just not something that they're particularly interested in. And I know Notre Dame operates the same way. Like they're never going to get into these bidding wars for guys. Like if you want to come here, then we'll take care of you. But
right.
We're not, you're not going to come to us and say, I'm getting offered this from this school and I want you to match. Yeah. Okay. See you later. Best of luck to you.
Yeah. And that's the thing with Clemson. That's exactly where the conversation is going to end with Clemson.
Yeah.
As soon as a player comes in, is like, oh, can you beat this offer? They're going to be like, nope, go ahead and go to that school. You're good. So it's just, and look, like I said, the funds are limited. Like there are, there's only so much fun. No one knows what the number is, right? What Clemson's NIL situation really looks like. None of this stuff is public information. But again, you have to be smart. And of course, first and foremost, you got to take care of your roster because, again, they could just hit the portal as well. So you got to take care of your roster, make sure the dudes on your roster that have been there are living good. And then, I'm sure they offer packages to these transfer portal guys that they're recruiting. But again, like you alluded to, they're never going to get into bidding wars or anything like and I don't think they should, honestly. I just don't. I don't. And maybe that'll prove to be not a good way to go about it. But I just don't think you should get in bidding wars with other teams over players. I just don't think that's a long-term good thing for any program, really.
No. I mean, and listen, and we all, think, these NIL opportunities were long overdue for these players, just from what they contribute to the game. And they are the game. Like they're the ones that put their bodies on the line, more than anybody else. And the ones that are out there, and put that time. It's tough to be a student athlete. And, but I think that we're in a place in the sport where, I don't think Clemson should just completely give in to all the things that are, going on right now as far as I think when things are in a more stable place and when these players have a steady, especially when, there's more uniform revenue sharing and stuff like that, where these players, have, there's very clear rules about how things are supposed to go. Then we can have those conversations. But, there's no other sport, especially if this is going to become like a semi-professional sport, there's no other. There's no professional. There's no other leagues that are operating the way that college football is right now. There are rules. There's collective bargaining. There's contracts. There are things you can do and there are things you can't do. Right. And there's a uniform schedule. There's so many things about college football that needs to change. And just completely buying into what's being, what's going on right now is not in Clemson's best interest either.
And frankly, it's pretty ridiculous where college football is right now. Like if you take emotion out of it and just stand back and look at college football logically, like it's the wildest thing that we're participating in this right now. Yeah. And I'm all for players getting paid. But let me tell you, NIL is not the way. Yeah. Because the fact that we have been duped into, not only do the fans have to pay for merchandise and tickets and all the money that it takes to travel to games and support these teams and all this stuff. But now we also have to pay for our teams to get good players. Because who's funding the NIL? The fans. The fans are funding the NIL. The coaches aren't funding the NIL,
especially at a school, especially at a school that doesn't have these large donors, right. And huge, mega, billionaires to just So we don't have Nike money. Shout out to Oregon, and they're doing what they have to, but we don't
I don't blame them.
We don't have a Phil Knight.
We would do it. We would do it if we had a Phil Knight writing checks too, right?
Yeah.
But we don't. And the thing that I get is even with these schools with these huge alumni bases whose fans can fit the bill, like a Texas A&M or all these other big fan bases and Ohio State, Michigan, all those kind that have these huge alumni bases, right? Why should the fan have to fit this bill? Yeah. Doesn't the fan already pay enough money? Why don't the TV deals, the TV companies, come off some of that revenue and give it to the players? Right. Why don't some of these schools come off some of their revenue and give it to the players? No, they all just want to push it off onto the fan, and it's our problem. Oh, we can't get – and you've heard some college football coaches come out and say, oh, we can't get good players because NIL money. Yeah. We need more NIL money from the fans. Why don't y'all give up some NIL money? It's always on the fan. I just got a huge problem with it. I don't mind the players making money at all. I think they should make money, but these TVs and these schools need to break off money for these players. It doesn't all need to be on the fans. Right. I'm cool. I'm cool with NIL as being incentives and all that kind of stuff, but these dudes should be getting, they should have a CBA. They should have, some form of revenue sharing. And eventually, I think that's where college football is heading. You've heard several college football coaches talk about it, a commissioner and a league of 40 to 50 or whatever teams. So I think we're going to get there eventually, but it's it's kind of crazy where we're sitting right now. It's insane. You just beating your fan base over the head. Like, we need more money. We need more money. Oh, you guys are mad we missed out on that recruit? It's because you didn't give us enough money. Like, what are we doing, man? Like, how did we get here in college football?
It's not a sustainable model. No,
it's not.
It's not, and it's not good for the health of the sport. So,
but yeah,
with that there, yeah, because we could get in the weeds about that, but but it is what it is, and I still feel Clemson is in a position to compete in the future, but they have to go about things a little bit differently, and that's what they've committed to doing, and so we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely, man. Well, I think that's been another successful all-in show right here on the Voice of College Football, guys. Again, thanks everybody for coming in and joining us. Appreciate everybody in here that contribute to the show, that comment, that hang out with us, that show up every Thursday. We'll be here right here next Thursday, 7 p.m., talking about the Tigers, talking about – we'll probably hit on the national championship game, talk about that a little bit, and then talk about anything else that's in the news of Clemson football and college football. So appreciate all you guys showing up. Jordan, you want to send the people off?
Yep. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. Another great show. First one of the new year. Still crazy to say that we're in 2024. It doesn't feel right, but looking forward to another great offseason. We're going to have a lot to discuss. We're not going anywhere. Same time every week, Thursday, 7 p.m. So, keep showing up, and we'll dive into any more news that comes out, during the week. And let's all get through this offseason together, because I'm already missing Clemson football.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. Me too. Can't wait for spring practice to kick off. I know we just ended the bowl game, but I can't wait. So we'll see you guys next Thursday, 7 p.m. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.